I'm making this video because I was unable to find the information that I thought was needed to correctly bias, replace and bias new tubes on the Blackstar HT 100. The information I've garnered, just so everybody watching this video or anybody that would watch this video knows, the information that I'm going to share with you is information that I've garnered from the internet based on my own e-research, my own e-searches. So yes, I use the Googles, I use the Bings, and what I'm going to talk to you about and what I've found is all related to information. I did not call Blackstar. I do not know what the official word would be other than take it to a repair shop. Don't do anything that you are thinking, well, that might not turn out so bad. That's a bad sign. The Blackstar HT 100, as you know, has 4 EL34B STR TAD branded. These are TADs. The one tube was replaced with a ruby tube, and I suspect, just in my initial measurements, that the bias was not rebiased. It was sitting at about 139 millivolts. Information, the numbers that I'm going to throw out are all information that I have garnered from my own research on the internet. You may want to call Blackstar. You may want to take this to a repair tech if you don't want to blow something up, if you don't want to run the risk. I've got lots of tube amps. I've got lots of tubes. I don't got lots of money. I'll be honest with you, I've already done some pre-work. I've already rebiased the tubes that are in there, but it's still displaying the symptom. So my next step right now, I'm going to go ahead and plug a guitar in and display the symptom that I'm hearing. And the symptom that I hear is when I really push the amplifier without strumming a note, without anything even plugged into it, even on standby, there is a very, very loud popping and crackling, random pops and crackles. And from what I've garnered from my own internet research, it lends itself to being a power tube section problem. These are the pre's. They're ECC 83s, and there's I think an 82 that drives the effects loop. We don't need to worry about that mess. You want to focus on the power tubes. That's what I'm here to discuss and rebias. So I'm going to go ahead and take it out of standby, and I'm going to go ahead and slowly turn up the main so we can get some volume. At this level right now, I've got a little bit of reverb on it because I'm a tone freak. It's pretty loud. That's about 98 dB. So I'm going to go ahead and switch into one of the overdrive channels. Right away, you can already hear it. Sorry it's so loud, just listen to the symptom. Okay, just put it in standby. You can imagine when my bandmate, that was me turning the power off, and as the capacitors drain, the popping stops. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to flip the amp over, and then we'll go ahead and pull the tubes out, the power tubes, and then I'll put new tubes in, and then I will go through the biasing steps that I've read on the internets that is needed for this thing to run optimally. Okay, welcome back to my first YouTube video, grand opening, stellar, super great, whatever. Because right now, we've already heard the symptom. These are our preamp tubes. They're fine, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and remove each one of the power tubes, which happen to be EL34B's STR TAD brand. And I'm gonna and just, I don't know if if you can see this because of the top-down view. The top-down view is really more for the board, but work that we'll need to do. But this process, these are slightly warm. They're not hot, but I'm going to tell you, if you've been running the amplifier for any period of time, and you go to grab a tube, you're going to leave your fingerprints on it. Do not grab a hot tube. Do not grab the preamps. If you've been using the amplifier or testing, you're going to be sorely disappointed when you leave your fingerprints on the glass. Okay, this is just a standard shop towel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab one of the power tubes, and I'm going to kind of rotate the tube very easily, very gently around. Now again, if you're not secure in doing this, afraid you might break the tube, take it to somebody. Don't play around. Why risk it? That's basically how an octal tube comes out. There is the key, if you will. I don't know, I know it's probably very difficult to see. I'm not going to do the YouTube thing where I pick it up and it goes out of focus, but that's the key, and these are the pins, and there's a key here. So there's pretty much no way for you to misinstall the replacement tubes. Okay, I would say that my 11-year-old daughter could accomplish this much. And as you can see, this is a or maybe you can't see, but this is a TAD tube, EL34B STR. Okay, you need to replace these in a matched quad pair. I don't recommend buying individual. I mean, if you're at a gig and a tube popped blue and you were absolutely sure that was what's going on, then you might be able to just swap a tube and get away with it for the night. Now, you may also be burning through a very expensive tube because, again, without checking the BIOS, you're really not 100% sure what you got going on. This is, by the way, is the suspect tube. But anyway, I would not just swap individual tubes. When you replace them, unfortunately, every recommendation I've read has been to replace them same brand, match tubes. And matching is well beyond the scope of this discussion. I will say that in a very basic sense, the electrical measurements of each tube should be within a certain range. You could go on and on about how close they're supposed to be and how perfectly matched, blah, 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 whatever floats your boat. But do buy them in a quad matched. Two pairs can be matched, quads can be matched. You can buy these in 4 or 2s that are matched. I chose to buy 4 that were already matched. This is a Ruby tube, and this is the one that when the very rude sounds, the popping and crackling we were hearing, this kind of lights up. And I think this tube is just bad. Now, it could be one of the other tubes. I don't have a tube tester. I'm not going to go through the whole rigmarole of trying to figure out how much voltage, blah, blah, blah. All I care about is I want to put the 4 tubes in there, rebias this thing, and I want it to work. Notice again, the last one, TAD. This is the only Ruby. When I first check this bias with the tubes, mismatched tubes that are in here, to let you know that it was 139 millivolts that were on the bias test points. From everything that I've read on the internet, and again, I just as a disclaimer, I have not talked to Blackstar. I am not a Blackstar dealer. I'm not a Blackstar anything. I don't even know where they live. So that said, my point being that everything that I've researched shows that the bias voltage should be 100 millivolts. Some people ask if they want to turn it up to 110, 115, or down, and they experience problems. I am going to bias this with new tubes at 100 millivolts. End of story. I'm not a tube expert, so if I'm spitting out things that don't sound right, take it for what it is. I've given myself a crash course in the last probably 3 weeks, a month, in tubes. I've watched every video I could. I have read as much as I could. Tubes are basically just like a solid state transistor, only in a tube form. There I've offended all the people that I'm going to offend. These are Tube Amp Doctor branded tubes, which are what come, as I understand, in the Blackstar to begin with. There's 4 of them. Unfortunately, it's not indicated on the box, or maybe it is. Always check to make sure what you're putting in there is the correct part. This is an EL34B STR. There's some numbers and things on there. I don't know what that means from the manufacturer, but these were purchased from, I want to say Amazon, from whatever vendor. I chose to go back with Tube Amp Doctor tubes because I wanted, again, the same sound that I was getting before. So again, these are TAD EL34B STR, and they are supposed to be quad match. So before I get yelled at by some people online, I will wipe away my fingerprints. These tubes are going to get very hot. Some people would argue that, oh, if you leave your fingerprints on the glass, it'll cause a failure or something, whatever. Great, super. So I'm going to use the same sort of method that I used. Again, that key is here, and I'm going to line that up with the key that is here, and I'm going to slowly, gently, I guess the word would be, work the tube into place, like so. And it doesn't take, there's no hammer needed. You don't have to, whatever. Once it's in there solid and you can look from the side and see that she's good, that's it. Wipe my fingers again so I don't get yelled at. Look at the key. There's the key. Place the tube into the slot as it belongs. Kind of give it a little bit of wriggle. Push while you're pushing down, and like a magic, brand new tube in place. And these aluminum fins help keep the tubes in place. So I'm going to go ahead and place these other two, and we're going to move on with biasing. So tube number 3, and order's not important. I will say that I'm doing them from right to left or left to right because it just makes it a little easier to access the tube. So again, there's the key. I know it's probably hard to see on the video. There's the key. I'm going to use the key as a guide, not the labels, not the writing on the tube, blah, blah, blah. So in she goes. And this looks pretty good. All 4 of them are now seated. I'm looking right here, sort of parallel to the socket, and they look good. They look like they're seated. Okay. So I have flipped the unit back over. I'm going to go ahead and reapply my 8 ohm load. It's already plugged into my speaker cabinet in the correct port. Please double check, guys. Don't plug an 8 ohm load of output into a 4 ohm load or vice versa. Fundamental 101. If you're going after a particular sound or want to blow something up, I'm all for it. I just assume for this video, 8 ohm load, cabinet, 8 ohm connector. So I've got my speaker cable plugged in. The guitar cable must be plugged into the head for this to properly apply plate voltage. So I'm applying this. I don't know if you can see, it's probably a little off camera. Not the point. Without the guitar cable plugged in, you are not going to be able to do this. So you'll have to have a guitar cable plugged in. Load. Right now, all of my volume knobs are turned down, and from one of the posts that I read, you're going to want to have all the switches out. Cable. This is the bad boy. So it's unplugged. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and plug it in, and this is the first time I've powered up these new tubes, so anything could happen. Hey, nothing happened so far. Right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let these cook for about, I'm going to let them go for about 10 minutes. I'm just going to let it warm up, and we'll take it out of standby when I get ready to bias it. I will let this warm up, and I will explain where the test points are. There's been a lot of posts about, hey, where are the test points? And I will try to zoom in and show you those test points. And then we'll conduct the bias, and then we'll actually crank it up and see if I can get something to melt down. It's been a few more minutes than 10 minutes. I was going to let I just turned on. I did not take it out of standby. Everything's still turned down. I have a load in it, have my guitar cable plugged in. The power obviously is on. That's how the amp has been warming up in standby. Just to give everybody an idea of what we're talking about here with regard to how hot the tubes have gotten in the amount of time that I've let them warm up. Little thermal measurement device. I don't know if you can see the red dot on the video. Probably not, but I'm pointing it right at the base of one of the tubes. It's registering about 120 to 122. I would say the tubes are probably about as warm as they're going to get. I'm going to go ahead and take it out of standby. What I'm not going to do is I am not going to start playing through the amp right away, because once you start applying a signal, amplification starts, and if the BIOS is already kind of jacked up, then waste your money on some new tubes. I'm going to, this is plastic. Okay, if you got any kind of metal on the case of your multimeter, and you probably can't see this display, but I'll shout out what it's reading. I'm going to set this is actually the DSP section for the reverb, up against these cables so that I can see the display. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to zoom in here real quick, and you're going to see that there is a connector right here on the board. And behind these wires, hiding behind these wires, are two terminals that are not connected to anything. You can see them right there. I know you can see them in plain view. Those two terminals are where you're going to measure your bias point. Now, I'm going to get yelled at probably by some folks, but it really doesn't matter as far as positive and negative, which terminal you put it on. All that's going to happen is, if you have the polarity reversed, is it's going to read a negative on your multimeter instead of a positive on your multimeter. So what is important is that these are metal, they will conduct electricity. And it's a tight space down here, and this is where you get into, is this for the faint-hearted or not? Now I'm actually going to take the measurements from the solder points for these two terminals right here. Okay, you can see that, but I am going to measure there instead of trying to reach in there and get those two pins. Do not let these things slip out of your hand, so to speak. Do not let these leads that you're going to use for taking measurements, don't let them touch anything in the case. Do not lay your arm accidentally across if you're not paying attention. This is all that goes in these leads. If you start putting stuff in here, or you have anything around that might fall in it, God forbid you put a drink anywhere near your electronics equipment. Anyway, that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and take our first measurement. What we're looking for, according to all my e-research, is 100 millivolts on my multimeter. And here goes. I'm going to go ahead and punch down the positive lead here and the negative lead, and I am reading 77.7 millivolts. I have a very small tipped electronics from the electronics store. It's cheap, I know, but it works, and I'm going to use that to adjust the bias resistor right here. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to turn it a little bit to, and again, this is the back of the amp and we're upside down. Okay, so in this orientation, with this being the back of the amp, this being the front, and this is the flat piece right here, the flat part of the adjustment, I'm going to turn it clockwise just a hair. And I mean just a hair. Do not make a full turn. Do not make, I mean just as little as you can turn it. Why? And I'll show you why. So we're going to remeasure. Remember, it was 77.7 millivolts to begin with. So we are now up to 98.6 millivolts. I'm going to go ahead and bump this up again. I'm looking for 100 millivolts, and it's interesting because I turned this down when I initially did my measurements on the bad tube because it seemed like it was about 140 millivolts, and now I'm turning it back up. So I'm 102 millivolts. I'm going to back it back down just a hair, and we're going to remeasure. What I'm looking for is 100 millivolts. Again, this is all based on my own e-search. I did not talk to, okay, we're back down to 98.9, and I'm going to bump it up just a hair and remeasure. I did not talk to Blackstar. I'm not going to sit here and search for perfection all day. Again, every time you put that probe in there, you need to be absolutely certain. So I'm sitting at 99.1. I'm going to let that go. That's just going to have to do. So the real test comes now. And I took it out of standby, so let's just remeasure, see if that temp went up a little bit, and it did. It was at 120 in standby. It is now sitting at 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and plug in, and you're either going to get a really great shot of this thing smoking, flaming out, or we're going to hopefully hear crystal clear, back to crystal clear sound that I've been looking forward to. Here we go. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and crank her back up. I was probably hitting about 95 dB when it started to fail. We're just a little shy of that at about 93 right now, so I'm going to go ahead and crank it on up. Get the mains turned up, and you hear the guitar buzz because I have a fluorescent fixture in here. My apologies, but that's just what it is. So now it's going to get pretty rude loud. Here we go. 95.1. I'm going to go ahead and push it a little harder. Again, I'm not really trying to blow the amp up, but if it's going to fail, it needs to fail on the bench here, not when I'm out playing. 4 brand new EL34B STR TAD brand power tubes. We just biased them. Here we go. That was probably about 110 dB. It's insanely loud in this room. One more time, I bumped it up even a little bit louder. And if this works, we're going to shut her down and call her repaired. Pushing 114, 118 dB. I'm going to bring the main down, bring the volume down. I'm going to put her in standby. From what I can tell, the 100 millivolt setting appears to be correct. Again, I just want to re-emphasize the test points are kind of hidden behind this wire. I'm not going to cut this. Too bad for you. But there's the test points. They have 2 soldering points right back on the board if you want to use the soldering points instead. If you're not comfortable sticking a probe in there, guys, take it to somebody, okay? Don't hurt yourself. From what I can tell, the amp sounds fantastic. I will tell you the new tubes, by comparison, sound darker. For you tone freaks, that might weird you out, but whatever it's worth, I think the amp sounds great. I'm going to leave it at about 99.1, which is what I was registered on the bias voltage. Between rehearsals and playing at church and playing out, I would say that probably after, I'd say about 3 months of that kind of activity would be a great time to recheck the bias. Just wanted to share the information that I gathered, and so far I got to tell you I'm super excited, very jazzed about the way this sounds. So I'm going to reassemble this. I'm not going to bore you with that video, and I'm going to take her out and play her tomorrow. So you guys have a great one.